Welcome to the Mystical Truths Podcast. This is Rebecca, and I'm really glad you're here. Let's unlock your world. This is a big topic, and I know I might rattle some feathers, but I think this needs to be said and heard. I chose the wording for the title because in order to really not be afraid and to understand what evil is about, you just have to know some things. So these are my words. I'm speaking from what I've learned, what I believe, what makes sense to me. And I totally respect anybody's beliefs that differ from mine. So let's get right to it. We don't have to live in fear, pain, danger, worry, stress, powerlessness. We have a long time been an opportunity right now to change the way humanity has lived and suffered for centuries. It's time that way more than just a few know that there is nothing to fear, unless you think there is. We do create our own reality even out of ignorance. Fear is a conditioned, or which means taught, belief in powerlessness. Evil is what life here looks like when someone is very far from their connection to Source. Hell is not a place. It's not a physical place. It's a state of mind. There is no being or source of evil. There's only a source of love. We're either looking at that or we're looking at all the contrast here and taking it way too seriously. We're either with the flow or we're trying to hammer out our own flow. Kind of what it would look like if an unexperienced teen decided to just get in that big vehicle over there and figure out how to drive it. Guidance just has a better outcome. I believe that no one begins this life in fear. It's taught, starting in the womb, by the multitudes of people here before us who became confused by all of this variety and contrast, and were searching for answers and explanations as to why unwanted and unliked things happen. Like, why do people get hurt? Why do they die, steal, kill? And humans have come up with all kinds of different so-called reasons and explanations and stories for that. So it doesn't take long before the young don't really stand much of a chance at retaining the trust and the eagerness that they came in with. One of the best parts, though, of being physical right now is watching the old ways crumble and more awareness happening. Several years ago, I said to any part of Source that would be listening, I said, I've learned a lot about life, the afterlife, and all of that, and I know there's more to learn, but I've always completely avoided the dark stuff. I'm ready to know, is there anything to fear? Is there a devil, a dark side, some evil influence that we can be controlled by or that can harm us? Something that we can be drawn into? Do we need to protect ourselves? Because I've heard all kinds of conflicting information about all of that. So what's the truth? And over a short period of time, the answers came. So in a nutshell, no, there's nothing to fear. However, we can create and attract experiences and people that are so opposite of love. And that can look and be awful. We are so free in this world that we can, in ignorance, have a very, very hard ride, obviously. But it's okay. There's never any judgment. But it doesn't need to be that way. And it's time we know that. Not hope it, but know that. And it's about now that your mind will go to, well, yeah, but what about the babies and the little kids and the animals? What about the bad stuff we see there? That actually could be a whole nother episode, but animals are some of our best teachers. Babies and kids, like you and I, are intelligent souls that are just maybe 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 years into a life experience. We all knew the parameters we had set for ourselves. We knew the selections we had made. And we don't really have contracts. I don't like that word because that sounds like a binding agreement. We have an understanding. We have an agreement. We have an intention to come here and experience some things. And we know we're putting ourselves into some situations or picking personalities that are going to be quite a challenge. So yeah, we know before we even focus a fraction of our attention into this life experience what even the beginning tough parts can be like. So can it be tough early on? Sure it can. Does it have to be? Maybe not. I guess we'll find out because things are getting better. Fear, which is stress, which is damaging, is self-created. It's self-allowed. It's a misinterpretation of what's really going on. It can also be a misperception of what's available or possible. Like the thought that humans are destroying the planet. That doesn't feel good because it's a misinterpretation of what's really going on. If you remember the episode I did when I had to make that drive up the Tennessee mountain, where one side of the road was a big ditch, the other side was a complete drop-off, right at the white line on the side of the road. That could have been stress. That could have been fear. That could have been a hellish ride up that mountain, or maybe even off the side of that mountain. But I knew that fear and stress wouldn't get me to the top of the mountain. So I talked myself through a drive I really didn't want to make. I knew I had to make it. I wanted to make it successfully because I had a van full of family. And it was raining, it was dark, and the fog was so thick you could only see right in front of the headlights, except for that one part where I couldn't see anything for a brief period. That's just an example of how we do have the choice. We have an option. I can choose stress and fear because that's a possibility. Or I can choose something better because there are other possibilities as well. And evil is what we create by going deeply into fear. It's what it looks like when someone focuses on negative contrast enough that they rarely sync up with the positive contrast that is available to all of us. And like I said, hell is a human concept. The more you close yourself off from source, the darker life gets. C.S. Lewis said years ago, the gates of hell are locked from the inside. So that inside job that we have control about is important to know. Darkness is simply the absence of light. There's no source of darkness. When the sun goes down, darkness doesn't come up. The light is still streaming. You just can't see it from where you're at. Source is always streaming. And sometimes we just aren't in a state of being where we can see it. So we have to change our state of being. The really, really good news is that since what you give your attention to becomes more, if you don't give your airtime, your thought time, your attention to evil or unwanted things, then you don't get more of it. And when odd things do occur, you get to know that it's just gotta be to your benefit somehow, and you look for the honey. So how did we get so conditioned into fear and stress? Well, there are a few ways. And the first one, and I don't mean to offend anybody's belief system. Like I said, we all can believe what we want to believe. It's a beautiful thing. That's why we have the word variety in this world, because we have plenty of it. But the first one is religious and spiritual BS. Not all of it, but two factors really stand out: a desire to control masses of people and an answer to why bad or unwanted things happen. The concept of the devil and hell has been around for a long time for those two reasons. The whole idea of it and the fear that it puts in people can be used to manipulate people. But I think even more so, we had to have wondered over many thousands of years, why do people kill each other? Why do we die? Why do we hurt each other? Why do things happen that we so much don't want to happen? And when you have an answer like, well, because there's a source of evil and it's tempting you and it can cause bad things, well then, okay, now you have an answer. But it's not a very good answer. It's not even truly an answer, but it worked for a long time for a lot of people because it takes the blame away. It takes the self-responsibility away. It was a way to just sort of try to kind of understand what's going on here, but we know more now. We don't need that false stuff anymore. And here's this is, you're going to love this. I'd say maybe about 25 years ago, maybe, friends of mine had their son in a Christian school. And so one day he comes home from school with this handout that he had been given. And it says at the top, "May I suggest the following as some of the devil's possible counterfeits." And then there's this 2-column table. One side is the devil's copy. The other side is God's original. So, for example, God's original would be pastors, the devil's copy, high priests. God's original, Christians. Devil's copy, witches. For God's original of prayer and God's leading are all the original of the devil's copy of pendulums, divination, astrology, fortune tellers, palmists, tarot cards, and the Ouija board. God's original, churches. The devil's copy, covens. God's discerning of spirits. The devil's copy, clairvoyance. I don't know why they just put clairvoyance there. If we're going to go that direction, we might as well put all the clairs in there. And I think it's interesting that they chose the word discerning of spirits. Discerning means good judgment. There's the word judgment. And of course, God's original angels. The devil's would be demons. God's original Holy Spirit. The devil's copy, mediums. This one's interesting. God's original meditation on the word. The devil's copy is transcendental meditation. So this is saying don't meditate and connect with source. Just meditate on the word, or the stuff that we've said is the word. The stuff that people have said for a long time is the word. The words that people wrote and translated however they wanted to translate them and said that's the word. God's original prayer meeting. The devil's copy, seance. This one also is very interesting. Well, they all are, but this is very interesting. God's original would be God's prophets. The devil's copy, prophets. And to me, that's just a show of complete ignorance. And I mean that in the way of, can you write something like this and just say what somebody told you that somebody told them that somebody told them out of fear or control? Have you learned what pendulums are about? Do you know how energy works? Have you looked at astrology? Astrology, people can go too far with astrology to the point where we don't do much when Mercury's retrograde, right? That's going too far with it. But astrology has some beautiful aspects to it. Fortune tellers, well, that's an old term. We don't tell people's fortunes. And in my opinion, everything changes as your thoughts change anyway, so let's not look too far out there. But again, what do you know about that before you write a paper like this? Palmists. Do you know? Have you even looked or researched to see if there's any truth to palmistry? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I'm pretty sure, actually, that the people writing stuff like this have not looked. Tarot cards. There's nothing bad about tarot cards. There's not one thing bad about tarot cards if you truly know what you're looking at. They're about the soul's journey through life. and they're very educational and very helpful. The Ouija board it's a board with some stuff on it. You could take a piece of paper or a piece of cardboard and put yes and no and numbers and whatever you want on there. It's a slow form of communication with the other side, and just like anything else, people can get goofy with it. Back when people were worried about the changeover from 1999 to 2000, there was a lot being said about what would happen with the computers, with all kinds of different things when that happened. And a year or two later, I saw a documentary on TV about the small group of people who were stationed. They were in the, it was like the army or they were stationed somewhere in a very remote place. And one of them somehow got a hold of a Ouija board. They were just goofing around, and they're wondering, asking questions about, is everything really going to go to hell in a handbasket when 1999 flips over to 2000? And so they're asking questions, and they started getting these answers that were making them afraid. And that, yes, things were going to get bad, and they should go AWOL and hide. And they took it so seriously that they did that. They went AWOL and hid. Now, we all know that 1999 flipped to 2000, and here we are. We're fine. So how did that, who gave them that information? Their own fears. So all of these things that, some people want to call the devil's copy or evil or dangerous or whatever, they're not that. It's what people do with anything that makes it educational or helpful or not. In my mind, I think, do you really trust God enough to educate yourself about these things to know the truth, right? If they're not helpful or if they're honestly scary, well, then you trust your God enough to look at that and be able to still stand strong as you're learning about what it is that you're afraid of. Another example is probably, somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, there were a few people that were coming around the neighborhood handing out these little tiny pamphlets for their church. And I held on to this because I thought, what are we doing? On the back of it, it says God's free gift of salvation. And I'll just read the first two. The first one is, recognize your condition. And there's a quote from Romans, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And then they explain no one is good enough to go to heaven on his own merit. No matter how much good we do, we still fall short. What? No wonder so many people feel powerless. The second one says, realize the penalty for sin. Another quote from Romans, for the wages of sin is death. And they explain, just as there are wages for good, there is punishment for wrong. The penalty for our sin is eternal death in a place called hell. This blows my mind that we would believe something like this. First of all, sin is just ignorance. Second of all, I don't know anyone who hasn't done something that we would call not good. And they even said no matter how much good we do, we still fall short. Well, we're screwed. You can't get around that. How do you die thinking that anything good is going to come out of that? Because we've all done something or some things that a church or people who are judging would call bad. Yet we teach each other these things, and we teach our children these things, that no matter what, you're pretty much screwed. I'm glad we're moving away from this. There's no power in that. And the thing that's funny about religion is that it has beautiful stuff in it. It all does. But we have wars over religion and the beliefs that are attached to that. We condemn people. Not everybody does this. So another way that we've been conditioned over the years into fear and stress is that for thousands of years, people have been telling stories of demons and deities, a fallen angel, various gods from things like an underworld. Humans have changed their stories so many times. We've changed the images, the details, and even the roles of God. We're pretty fickle. And another one is judgment. These are opinions and even laws about who you should be, how you should live your life, what you should look like, what you should have, and what is acceptable and even legal. How about we just admit that we're all here to live and let live? And I know some of your minds go, hold on a minute, that would be complete chaos if we just live and let live. Well, watch, because live and let live is where we're headed. It's our nature, and we can do that. We can respect everybody else's differences and ways of going about life, and then we won't be pushing against each other and hurting each other. It's not our natural desire to do that. In my opinion, Portia Nelson's Autobiography in 5 short chapters sort of sums up how the human race has been evolving. And it goes like this. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. So I think that's sort of what we've been doing for a long time. We've been walking down that street, falling in the hole, not taking responsibility for it, not saying that we do create our own reality. And it's okay when we fall in a hole, but we've got to know we're there. We've got to know there's a solution. There's a way out of the hole. And then eventually we just walk around the hole. There's no need to fall in anymore. We're alert. We are self-creating. And now I think we're pretty much ready to walk down another street. So over many, many years, people took a love for things like extremes, drama, suspense, and power into a long, deep, twisted rabbit hole of negativity. But that, as always, is bringing us to an exit hole where the light shines. And the human race has had quite a long dance with all things negative. We've gone extreme and long and hard and brutal. And more than ever before, we're ready to stop beating our heads off that wall. We're understanding that even in those extremes, Source is there. That loving intelligence can and does guide us right from where we're at. Even if that's a really dark place, it can speak that language. Just like when you're really angry, you cannot hear words like think better thoughts or find your happy place. You can't relate to it. You're not vibrationally anywhere near that. So someone in a really dark place will require guidance from Source that isn't far from their current state. The guidance from rage may be revenge, and then into anger, and then into blame, and then into disappointment, and then up and up and up vibrationally until you're far away from that. And that's a reference to the emotional guidance scale from the Abraham Hicks material, by the way. So when you're in fear, you'll see and experience fearful things. That doesn't mean you're not being guided, though. Source will never join you in your fear or your misery. They'll never get in the mud with you. They can't help you from there. They're calling. Source and all who guide us are just calling and guiding us away from all of that in temporary next steps. And that's because we generally just can't make that big jump from rage to contentment all in one jump. And you know what that feels like. You've just got to feel a little better, and then it gets a little better, and then it gets a little better, and then you're back to your happy self. So the bright side of the dark side is that everything is Source or God. And they guide and teach us in any state of mind or experience that we get ourselves into. Bad things are just good things trying to work out. So if you change your perspective, and next time don't let it get so intense, it gets better and better and easier. So if you have some scary entity dogging you, ask yourself, what's up? Where's the honey in this? What can I learn from this? Why is this here? Why am I calling this in? What good does it have for me? Because it always does. And we have the freedom to feel the guidance or not. It's always streaming. But until you get curious and a little bit more easy about it, you really won't get a whole lot of realization of that guidance. And I think it's vital that we know all this right now. Don't allow AI to scare you, or the wars that are going on, this conspiracy, the government, food, big pharma, the air. Don't let any of that, whatever's going on there that's got you upset, isn't helping you. We want the good versions of all of that. We want the good versions of everything. So we have to have our attention on the better versions. I think it's good to take the word fear out of your vocabulary if you can. And you can. It takes a little practice maybe. Because we say it, people say it so easily. Like, I'm afraid that if I put this onion in the soup, it's going to overpower the soup. I'm afraid that if I don't do things a certain way, I'll get fired. Or I think AI has a lot of potential, but I'm really afraid of what could happen. I'm really afraid of how it could take over the world or whatever. That's not helping, right? We have to stop saying things like that and stop taking our attention in directions like that, or we will find more of it. And I don't think that's really where we're going. I think we've got a pretty good footing, and I would like to keep that going and enhance that. And the more of us that are paying attention this way, the smoother this is going to be, the better this change and the shift that we're going through is going to happen. Source tells us that one person who is tuned in and is looking for the honey, looking for the solution, trusting in Source, knowing that all is really well, one person in that state is more powerful than millions who are not. So let's get our numbers up. You, just you. The more you can trust, you don't have to go out there and put it all over social media. You don't have to even tell anybody. You can do this just from your own personal space inside yourself, and you will be more powerful than many, many who don't know that or are opposite of that. Love always outpowers because everything comes from that. That is a source. That's the source of everything. And we designed this contrast here. None of this is bad, really. None of this has been against anything. This is all part of how we expand and how eternity becomes eternal. The more we play and the more ideas we have, the more even negative contrast we look at still causes the positive parts of it to exist and become. We're moving quickly into the light, so to speak. As a people, we're sort of lightening our load. And that's really a good thing. Is it going to look pretty from all angles? Maybe not. We're already seeing the weirdness of it, and we have for a while now. But where do we want to take this? Do we want more trouble, or do we want more ease? And you can say what you want, but if you're not taking your energy there, if you're not taking your mind there, if you're not taking your trust and belief there, then your words don't mean anything. So this change that we're going through will be as smooth as we allow it to be. So I promise you there's nothing to fear unless you think there is. And what that means is, if you really can find your connection with your trust in love, with your trust in God or Source, then you know for sure there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to fear, whether it's a war or putting onion in your soup. All the same to Source. Not one is any bigger or smaller than the other one. It's all part of what is or can be going on here. And I know you can look around right now and say, well, we do have some wars going on. We do have some things going on that are not wanted. Look for the benefit in them. Look for the honey in them. Know that you can be the one who is over there when the bomb goes off over there. Unless it's your day to die, then you're going to be where the bomb is, and that's a wonderful thing because death is amazing. So hang on to your happy. Look for the honey and trust that there's nothing to be afraid of. The other day I was going through some old papers and I found this little comic that I cut out of a paper years ago. It's from LaughParade by Bunny Hoest and John Reiner. There are two birds sitting on a branch, and the one bird looks to the other bird and says, I can't understand why anyone would get upset about opening a can of worms. It's funny, but it's also pretty deep. So I hope this has helped you in any way to feel better about your life and about where we're all headed. There's a really sweet version, and we're in pretty good shape to get that version going forward. So keep your eye on that. And as always, if I can help you out at all, you can find me at mysticaltruths.com.